Hello, movie fans. Demetri Panos here for Anatomy of the Movie of the Popcorn Talk Network, where today we're going to take a trip to Manchester by the Sea. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
Well, hello again, and this is Demetri of Anatomy of a Movie, part of the Popcorn Talk Network. Joined by my lovely, beautiful co-host today, Emily.
Hi.
We're together again.
Yes,
How
I
exciting.
know. This is becoming a thing. I like it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, enjoy having you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And as I said, today we will be taking a trip up Route 1, going past Beverly, going through Danvers and Beverly, going through Essex, and landing at Manchester by the Sea today. As we open up our shows, we always start off with thoughts, opinions, before we really break down and get into the movie. So I will start with you.
Yes,
What did you think?
I liked this movie, and I'm somebody who likes happy endings at the end of movies. You know, I'm somebody that likes everything to just kind of be tied up very nicely. So when this film ended and it wasn't necessarily like that, it kind of shocked me. I wasn't expecting it. But then I had to be reminded that this film sort of represents life in its truest form, and life isn't always perfect. It doesn't always end neatly and nicely the way you want it to.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a really great film. I thought the acting was excellent. Yeah, I really liked it.
Well, you know, it's I have a quote from writer-director Ken Lonergan. So I'm going to get into that just to talk about what you said. You know, for me, this movie, is literally one of the best movies of the year that I've seen. It is a heavy movie.
Yeah.
You know, and it is steeped in depressing tragedy, but I also found that there was humor in it.
Yeah.
And I think that Casey Affleck's performance was amazing. I believe that not only do I think he's a shoo-in to get a nomination for the Academy Awards, I believe that if things continue, he could potentially walk away with a little gold statuette. I think he was that strong of a performance. With that said, I think the supporting cast, including Michelle Williams, they were amazing. Everybody else was amazing. What I really loved about this too is that nobody chewed up the scenery.
Yeah.
It was all very subtle. Casey Affleck, the way he would avert his eyes from talking to somebody or feel uncomfortable or show his eyes where you could see anger, and Michelle Williams, you know, the same way. That's what I really loved about this too, that nobody here in this movie, it would have been out of place. Nobody really chewed up the scenery. And, you know, and I also think that, you know, through its subtleness, it was a subtleness that sort of kind of punched you in the gut. I think one of the best scenes I've seen in movies this year was a scene between Michelle Williams and Casey Affleck. And the way that it plays out, I mean, good God. Really an amazing emotional scene that just is so heavy as well, but the way that it's played out was fantastic. And like I said, I think the film is not without its humor. If anything I learned is that sarcasm said with a Boston accent is funnier. So you're going to hear a lot of Boston accent here. And plus, I have to throw this in here. Any movie, regardless of whether it's depressing, tragic, or whatever, that spends at least 10 minutes talking of the awesome merits of Star Trek. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, and going into this quote about what you said, yes, this is a movie that doesn't necessarily end with, you know, a character arc or such. It ends nicely, I think. We'll talk about the end. For you folks who've been with us, we're very spoilerific, so we will talk about major plot points, twists, and or anything else that happened in the movie. So the end ends with our two lead characters at the back of their boat, the fishing boat, out in the sea fishing.
Yeah.
So I thought it was tender, sort of kind of set everything up. But Lonergan says, I don't like the fact that nowadays it feels like it's not permissible to leave something unresolved. He goes on to say, I mean, what the fuck is closure? Some people never get that. Some people live with their trauma for years. I'm not interested in rubbing it in those people's faces, in suffering, or in saying, these are tough facts of life that I know you don't. But I don't like this lie that everybody gets over things that easily. Some people can't get over something major that's happened to them. Why can't they have that movie too? Why can't there be one film about somebody who doesn't magically bounce back?
Yeah.
That's this movie.
Right. And that's absolutely valid. And I think the thing is, though, when we go watch movies, at least for me, and I think I kind of represent the majority of people that just like to go to the movies. The reason I go is to kind of forget about, problems or things that are happening. So it's nice to see a movie, and at the end, things kind of happen nicely. It's like a little uplifting moment. It kind of sets you back on the track, like, okay, good. There is good in the world. Everything's going to be okay, And when things like this happen, when you get invested for 2 hours or however long the movie is in these characters, and you're rooting for them, you want them to do well, you want them to succeed, and then they don't necessarily do that, it's hard not to feel like it is a little bit of a letdown,
Yeah,
so,
that didn't bother me. And there are plenty of movies too, though, throughout history that end not on a high note.
Right.
And I know we are living in times where we're expecting that, much like Lonergan had said. For me, straight up, I was dreading to go into this movie. I heard that this movie was very depressing.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, don't need that in my life right now.
Yeah.
But, I wanted to take one for the team, and I had heard that it was a very good movie. So I went to a Landmark theater. I sat down in my chair, and I knew very little about this movie other than it involved a family tragedy. One of the theater staff comes in, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, you're here to see Manchester by the Sea. The runtime of this movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I sat in my seat and I said, oh, fuck. I go, are you kidding me? I'm going to be bashed over the head with depression for 2 hours and 20 minutes? Luckily, I don't know. I found it, maybe I think that it was going to weigh so heavily that I found it palatable.
Yeah.
And again, I did think that it was not without humor.
Right. I think
which helped.
That helped a lot. I think that the comedic scenes were my favorite parts of the movie, because it is a heavy subject, it is a heavy film, but you had these moments where it's like the sarcastic humor, especially between Lee and Patrick. I really like those moments. I like the quote when Patrick comes in and Lee's looking at the guns and he says, "You're going to shoot me or you?" And just kind of those moments I loved in the film. I thought that if the film did not have those comedic moments, it would have been a completely different film.
Oh my God. And it's funny when that scene that you were talking about, and let's preface this by saying just a little bit about this story. So we have Casey Affleck's character. I forget his name.
Lee Chandler.
Lee Chandler gets summoned back to Manchester by the Sea, where he was born, raised, spent most of his life, because his brother had passed away. So he's going to come and unbeknownst to him, he finds out through the will that he is now going to be looking after his nephew. And then through various flashback in chronological order, we see the bond that Lee and his nephew had while the nephew was growing up. And then we also see the tragedy that befell Lee's immediate family, his wife, kids, a horrible, terrible accident leading to his kids getting killed, burned in a fire. So him coming back to Manchester is obviously a hard thing to do. Now he's being saddled that he has to look after his nephew. through a flashback, we saw that scene where he was with the fire department and the police explaining the story. And, they're like, look, it's an accident. Terrible accidents happen all the time, which really doesn't help the situation, obviously, for Lee's character. And he gets up as he's walking out. He pulls a gun off the cop and tries to commit suicide. So later in the movie, when we see those guns, to me, it was a sense of foreboding. And I was like, oh, no. I was like, can this movie get any more depressing? And the mere fact that the nephew comes in and goes, you going to use that on me or yourself? Like, what are you going to do? Boom, it cut the tension. And then when he turned it around, because I think one of the better parts of this movie, and again, where there was this idea, he goes, do you know how much those guns are worth? He goes, we could sell those and fix the motor on the boat. And the nephew smiles. I smiled too, because I don't think I could have taken a suicide movie. And it was a nice turn that Lonergan had, and I really appreciated it.
I think it kind of showed the growth too of Lee's character. That he didn't have, obviously, like you said, this huge arc where at the end he goes, oh, everything's great, I'm staying and I'm gonna raise Patrick here. Obviously that didn't happen, but I think it showed the growth kind of in those two moments with the gun. The first time we saw how he tried to commit suicide, and then the second time with the guns, how he was thinking about, okay, how can we save this boat? What can I do for Patrick? What can I do for somebody else? Rather than the one path of committing suicide. But on the other hand, he's saying, I'm using these guns to help somebody else. I'm going to do something to help. So I thought it was good growth of his character. It kind of showed us that he did, kind of change a little bit. And he's, I guess getting better, as much as you can say getting better after something like that happens to you. Yeah,
and I'll say that to me is part of, I think there is an arc to his character, because before it was, I'm going to be your ward. I'm going to be your, I'm going to be your parent now. You're going to move with me into Boston. You're going to come into Boston with me, and I'm going to uproot your life and such. And as the movie progressed, he made it so he didn't have to disrupt his nephew's life. Which for him, it was like, listen, I want to do what's best by you. Patrick or Lee realizes, I can't live here. And I for sure can understand this. But I'm going to make sure that you're set up. And I'm even going to look for an apartment in Boston that has 2 bedrooms so that you can stay with me. I'm still going to be a part of your life. I want to be a part of your life. But I really enjoyed that, because at the beginning of the movie, he wasn't that man. He wasn't that man at all. I guess if I'm going to nitpick at this movie, or maybe it's something that makes the movie a little bit more tragic, is that, wow, I just felt bad that he didn't have any close friends with which, he could lean on, so to speak. When he was in Boston, he really did leave, and it was self-imposed, obviously, a very solitary life. But also, that boy needs therapy, and we didn't see any point where he attempted to try to get some semblance of help. But it made it sad too that he didn't have friends to fall on.
And I kind of feel like it showed, before the fire happened, all of his friends were there. It was a big party scene in the house, 15 guys, whatever. Everyone's drinking beer. And so it showed that he did have that life before. And then after this tragedy, he obviously was the one that separated himself from everyone, just because I think he detached from life totally. And I think the only person that kind of tethered him to family or to reality was his brother, was kind of the only person that said, like, okay, you're staying here, however much I can hold on to you, I'm going to hold on to you. It kind of seemed like his brother was the only person that really kind of kept him in reality in some sort, because otherwise it would have just been that routine of going to work, going at home, sitting watching TV, and that's it. That was his life.
Yeah, I'll take it a step further. I think it was his brother that kept him alive. And there was that attachment to particular people. There were the the gentleman who oversaw the boat for him, who knew about the boat, who could do with the motor, that eventually ended up taking his nephew in. Yeah. But if there's the scene at the hospital, too, that happens early on, where he's looking for his brother's regular doctor who is out on maternity leave. And he was like, well, where is she? Yeah. Like, why? Like, I understand that. I get it. There was a lot of this movie that just from a personal note, that I could that I was in touch with, whether it was being uncomfortable in a social situation, or whether if you're attached to a particular doctor and that doctor's not there, it's sort of an odd feeling. And I got that scene. It was and again, it was a strong scene when you break it down, because it just goes on what we're talking about. He tethered on to particular people, and when those particular people couldn't be in his life, things sort of kind of unraveled a little for him, So the other thing that I found very fascinating about the screenplay and story is that, what did he become? He became a handyman. He became a person who had to fix things for other people. He had to fix their problems. Yeah. Okay? And it was only when those people, if they became belligerent about it, would he speak up. Yeah. And again, some of the more humorous parts in the movie, but I just found it interesting. He was fixing things for other people where there are things in his life he couldn't fix. I found that to be very interesting. Yeah. I found that to be an interesting play on the character himself.
And I think it's interesting too, speaking on that point, that it didn't seem like he had, passion for anything, but even when he is fixing things for people, it's like he kind of took it in the attitude of, take it or leave it. He'd tell people you can do this, or if that doesn't work, we'll try this.
Or you can do it right now. And the guy's like, well, what do you think I should do?
Exactly.
It's not my decision.
He's like, I don't know. So you're right. He kind of took on this fixer role, but even in that role that he had, he still was not all in, excited about it. Obviously not excited about anything. So I think it shows a lot about his character and where he was at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the more humorous scenes in the movie too is one of those tenants that he's fixing the apartment for. You overhear a phone conversation where she's really hot for him, and he was plunging her toilet, and he's like, "Okay, all done." She goes, "Can I give you a tip?" And he's like a suggestion? I was like, she's like, "No, like money." He goes, "Okay," but he was very uncomfortable. And there could have been a connection, but he decided, eyes down, head down, and took the money and walked out. Yeah. It was humorous, but at the same time, sad, touching. I want to talk about the genesis of this entire project, and I think I would be remiss that a lot of this stemmed from Lonergan's past movie, which I believe is called Madeline, that he had directed about 10 years ago, and was plagued with lawsuits. The movie was almost taken away from him. He was being sued by one of the producers, who said that he was not delivering a movie, a releasable movie, in the time frame that producer wanted it. And this movie he hasn't directed a movie in almost 10 years. And it really put him in a stupor, in a depression, in a funk, so to speak, of something that needed to be, he needed to overcome at some point in his life, because he did feel that it was tragic. And what I found very interesting is that when this Manchester by the Sea was its pieces were starting to fall into place, he was actually working on the Blu-ray version of this movie Madeline, and it was an extended version. It was a version that he wanted to put together originally, and this was Madeline was a movie that was apparently very close to his heart. It was to be his opus, and things just went horribly wrong. I can get how you can get jaded in this town. Yeah. It happens, right? But then, then these people you may have heard of, Matt Damon, John Krasinski. They had worked with Lonergan in one of his plays, and they had thought up an idea of a man who may not be able to get over a tragedy.
Yeah.
And they came to him and said, wow, we would love to star in it. We want you to write it. We want you to write it. I'm going to direct it. I think this was Matt Damon wanted to direct.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, I'll give it a go. I'll give it a crack. And, he had to find it out. But this movie took many years, and so many years, in fact, that even Matt Damon says, he goes, well, my schedule just started getting filled.
Yeah.
He goes, I couldn't do it. Krasinski couldn't do it. So he goes, what I found funny is that he goes, then I decided to give it to, I was going to give the role to Casey. I donated. It was almost like, he's funny. He goes, I donated the role to Casey. And it was one of those happy accidents that I'm sure Matt Damon would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he would have nailed it.
I don't think
as much
you
as Casey.
Yeah, looking back on it, because I didn't see a whole lot of press for this film or a whole lot of, lead up to it. So I did know that Matt Damon was involved somehow. I didn't know the extent that he was almost involved in the film. And looking back at it, Casey was absolutely the right choice for this film. If I am such a huge fan of Matt Damon, I will watch anything he's in. I think he's an
he's
excellent
a good actor.
Yeah,
fantastic.
But not right for this role. I think Casey was the person that should have played this role, and I'm really glad that it ended up the way that it did. And it's just interesting the way things happen. Like Matt was going to direct it and star in it, and now he just was, I think, an executive producer, one of the producers on the film.
But it's very interesting. He was a producer of the film, but he was a producer who he had it specifically written. This is what you can appreciate about people like Matt Damon. Mm-hmm. He wanted to protect his director. Mm-hmm. He actually got final cut. Matt Damon got final cut of the film. Mm-hmm. For the pure and simple reason that he did not want Lonergan to go through, potentially, another Madeline situation.
Right.
He wanted to ensure that did not happen again. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm going to get final cut. If things get crazy, I'll politely step in and try to work things out. But he said, much to my, well-being and happiness, never happened. I loved the film, gave Lonergan anything that he needed, and he got the film done the way he wanted it done and the way that he wrote it. And I love that story, and I liked that Matt wanted to protect the property. Yeah. So that to me, he goes, he even says, in a bizarre kind of fit of generosity, I gave it up to Casey. And right now he goes, I wouldn't give this role up to anybody but Casey Affleck.
Yeah, it was perfect for it.
Perfect for it. Yeah. So, I like stories like that. Mm-hmm. And with Kenneth Lonergan writing this too, it took him 3-4 years to get the script out into something that he liked. And, the other thing that I found fascinating about this movie is its setting. Mm-hmm. I'm from Boston. I'm from a town called Peabody, which is no more but a half hour or so away from Manchester. And I've been to Manchester by the sea. I've been to that area. So it was great seeing that local flavor. I'm not quite sure this movie could have been filmed or told in any other area. Couldn't be filmed in California, that's for sure. I think that the setting of it being winter, I think that was very purposeful. Don't have winter out here. Kind of this sea town. I think that, everybody being the characters that they are, the only other place, a locale that I can think of might be someplace, seafaring town, maybe in upstate New York, But I think Manchester by the Sea is as much a character in this movie, and how it plays, and being that it was winter, it's not the sunniest of days. When you're in the East Coast like that.
Right. Well, and
I love that.
Kenny had mentioned to that point that he was very specific about when they filmed this movie. he wanted it to be filmed showing it going from winter to spring to show the transition of the characters and the I guess, growth of the characters. So it was filmed, I believe, February 2015 through May of 2015. So obviously those moments when the characters are just starting out, when we see all the despair, was filmed in winter, you know, and showing at the end how it kind of ends in spring. You see them fishing off the back of the boat, not in heavy coats or freezing, you know, so it kind of showed the growth of the characters. I could see this being shot in other areas just because I think that the way that they shot it wasn't very overly done, you know? I loved the kind of cuteness of the town and the Cape Cod styles, and even the set directors were saying that they wanted the homes to be bright and warm. They didn't want it to just be this depressing, awful, gray, snowy film, you know? Right. So I like that. I loved where it was set. I think it fit perfectly. I could probably see it some other areas, but I do agree that I think it needed to be someplace where there is, you know, there are seasonal changes, and we do see that shift.
Yeah, and like I said, I just don't think California, you know, is the place where, plus you get that, you know, there is something about, there's something about the East Coasters, you know, they're very set in their location. They don't move out. So some people, born, raised, never venture. Some of them never get in a plane. Like the closest they'll go to is Cape Cod, sometimes New Hampshire, Maine, but they don't venture that far away. For Len to go to Boston to really get out, and he wasn't lying. He wasn't lying when he says it's like an hour and a half from Quincy. Yeah, he ain't kidding with the traffic. Yeah, it could suck getting up to Manchester by the Sea. Yeah, and so I found that to be very interesting too. The other thing that I really liked is that Casey Affleck and Kenneth Lonergan had discussion about the accent. And Casey Affleck, let's see, what he says? He goes, you know, first off, he researched the area, right? And everybody has their character, their personality. Yeah. But Casey says to him, he goes, and while it's not like a Southie accent, which it's not, he just said, Casey said, no one talks like that under the age of 40, Kenny. I'm not fucking doing it. And then not 2 hours later, some 12-year-old boy was on set, and he was like, oh my God, is that Casey Affleck? And I just thought that was, and from there he goes, that kid's well under 40 years old, Casey. You're using your accent. But that's another thing too about this movie. When I see movies that are set in New England, period, sometimes that accent, if it's done improperly, nails on a chalkboard. Yeah. Like nails on a chalkboard, but everybody like really nailed it, you know, from Gretchen Mol to Kyle Chandler, who again, I should mention, who plays the brother. Yeah. He was really, really good. Yeah. Kyle Chandler was fantastic in this movie. And again, everybody seemed to get the flavor of Manchester by the Sea, this little town. Yeah. There wasn't anybody that I cringed. Yeah. There are some movies where I see that are supposed to be set in Boston and New England, and I just cringe at the accent. I think everybody did. Was great.
And I know Michelle Williams said that before the film started, she would just take the train. She lives in New York, so she would just take the train to Boston or to Manchester by the Sea and just kind of sit in cafes and go to the mall and just kind of see how people do life there and what kind of the mannerisms are that people use. So she said that was one thing that she was very, dedicated to before the film started, is kind of figuring out how people really are to stay true to the character. And it probably helps too. Casey Affleck is from that area, so it's probably good that he kind of has some sort of familiarity with it. So that was nice.
And again, I think it just adds to the flavor of this movie. And again, it just goes back to me. It's a character in this town that you're not going to, again, maybe upstate New York or something, that it really fits into this movie really well. And I really appreciated how that all came together. I really do like that. Again, from a production standpoint, didn't take long to film. According to The Hollywood Reporter, an article I found on The Hollywood Reporter, was about $8.5 million budget. Not bad. Which is very reasonable. Yeah. I'm not sure Again, this is a roadside attraction movie, which is a subsidiary of Lionsgate Films. They fall under that umbrella. But they're not going wide with this movie. They're
Right.
letting it they're letting it roll out. They're letting this buzz catch on so that by the time we get to Oscar time, there'll be enough fervor. And I see this movie anywhere between at the end of the day 500 to 1,000 locations, which is pretty good. And I really, really, this too is again where it was going in festivals. I believe the National Portrait Review just named it Best Picture of the Year.
Yeah.
The buzz on this picture, there's been a great groundswell.
Yeah.
So, and it's original as well.
I had to really hunt for it to find a theater that was playing it. I was kind of shocked when I
Me too.
I had seen it, kind of just in ads and a couple trailers, I think, when I'd been to other movies. And I went, when I was going to go see it, I looked at my local theater that I see all my movies at, and it wasn't there. And I'm like, wait, did I miss it? Is it not out yet? Is it already passed? What's happening? And I had to go, I don't know, like 30 minutes away from where I normally go just to watch it. It was crazy.
I had to. Yeah, I wasn't playing at a theater near me, so to speak. I think it'll eventually get there. So again, it may not be. You're checking us out now. You're hearing all the spoilers, but I like I said, I think by Christmas time, it'll have expanded and have gotten this amazing buzz, which it's continuing to get. Now, talking about Casey Affleck for a little bit, he talks about, I found this article on Deadline Hollywood, and he was asked, I think it's a really good question, just your reaction to your first pass at reading the script. And he's quoted as he goes, it was one of those reads where you stop analyzing. He's like, sometimes you read something and there's a part of you that remains in an analytical actor place. And he's like, am I going to do this movie? Is it a good part for me? That sort of thing. And almost immediately I was just absorbing it like it was a piece of nonfiction, some complete, a complete piece of writing that was in and of itself a thing, not a blueprint to be built upon. It was complete. It says a lot to his writer-director, Kenneth Lonergan.
Absolutely.
And I think it says a lot about Casey Affleck, too. In a way, I like the question because from an actor's perspective, what's an actor thinking? They got to think like, obviously you I guess you would think, is this a right role for me? Is this going to help me? Is it going to hurt me?
Yeah.
And Casey Affleck's career has been marred with, he will admit himself, he's been in some bad movies that he hasn't, even watched himself. But to be fully absorbed where that washes away the analytic side and to be brought into a script, and to say, because this is it's a heavy movie where you can't just be depressed all of the time.
Yeah.
And you have to like the character too, and that's where I think his performance was amazing.
Yeah.
And I like that whole thought process.
Yeah. I know he had said that they spent a lot of time, like months, talking about the script before they actually, started filming, that there were long rehearsal periods, and he would spend time just talking to Kenny about what direction they wanted to go in. And Casey also said that Kenny is the kind of director that's open to what an actor is going to bring. He's not that type of the director that says, this is my vision, this is what I want. Casey said he has equal conversation about characters, and that he treats all actors on set with the same dignity. So I'm sure it's somebody that all of the actors in this film, I'm sure, felt very safe exploring the depths of their character because they had a director that was willing to support them on that, which is awesome.
And the other thing too is that someone said, but in better words, for Casey, it's a balancing act, like from happy to joy, whatever, from happy to tragedy to sadness to depression. And there is that balancing act. The other thing that I found interesting too is that we've on this show as a whole recently, if you pay attention, there's been a trend in certain movies, particularly the smaller independent ones, in which they're shot in order, okay? In the order of the scene. Not in this movie.
Yeah.
So they really did have to do a balancing act. And when you have zero money, less time, we had to just jump around. And it was important that Casey says that I keep in mind that before that doing that, he had to be within character, but also within the post-tragedy. There has to be its own terms of where this is and where he has to get to. So not filming in order, in trying to stay in character, again, a very challenging act for Casey and everybody else too. Everybody else around him.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. And just going off of that, Michelle Williams, I didn't realize this until after I saw an interview with her, but it's true that she's not in this film a whole lot. She's a huge character in the film, especially in Casey or Lee's life. But she's not in this film a whole lot. And she said that when she came on set, everyone was kind of working together, obviously Casey and Lucas. And she had to kind of come in and just do a cold scene. I think it was this one, actually. This main one was her first time on set, just jumping in and doing it. And that speaks so much to her as an actress, that I would not have guessed that was her first day on set, just walking in and nailing that.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Michelle Williams.
Yeah.
She bears talking about her performance.
Yeah.
Again, you're right. She's not in this movie a whole lot of time. However, I think her performance, I think the character, the way that it's written, the way that it's performed, potentially could see an Academy Award nomination for this. But she is a character that changes. I mean, when we first see her, she's in bed, sick, not looking the best, surly attitude, to say the least. Okay, they have the kids. They set the scene up quite well. When and after the tragedy happens, the fire happens, you can sense that there's trouble.
Yeah.
When, Lee's trying to help her. Number one, that scene trying to get her into the ambulance.
Oh.
I mean, in a Marx Brothers movie, it would be hysterical. In this movie, it was like just sort of kind of, it was uncomfortable.
This is what I heard about this scene. And I saw this on IMDb, so I'm assuming that it's legit. But somebody said the scene where the nurses try to roll the stretcher into the ambulance and they keep falling and they can't get it up, they said it was not scripted. And the actors actually continued to struggle to get the stretcher in. It was actually happening in real time. They couldn't get the stretcher in. And Kenny decided not to cut it and just keep it in, which is amazing. I'm like, I love when I find out things like that, where it's like that actually happened. That wasn't just planned. Those people were actually struggling getting her into the ambulance.
Yeah, and the wheels kept on dropping. And then Casey would keep on trying to reach out to Michelle.
Yeah.
And like she kept on, when she kept on batting his hand away, right from there you can sort of sense, things aren't going to really end well in this. That scene, this particular scene, again, when she shows up, again, later in the movie to go to the brother's funeral, she looks like a transformed person.
Right.
Her hair is not in disarray. She's beautiful, is a word where before, like I think, and I think this is done on purpose, she had a cold, she's not looking good, and I get it. But then when we see her at the funeral, and then particularly in this scene where they accidentally bump into each other, she has become a different person.
Yeah.
And what made the scene for me so gut-wrenching, there was a line in which she says something like, I feel like I should burn in hell for the things that I said to you. For her, for those words to be chosen, that he writes, considering the tragedy that befell the family, burning, and her saying, I should burn as well. I should burn in hell for what happened and the way that it was delivered. And she wanted to reconnect with him. And Casey's performance wasn't one of anger in this scene. it was sort of it was very much of self-doubt, uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
Of like, I appreciate you saying that, but no, we don't have to.
Right.
Don't worry about it. And he really couldn't look her in the eye. I mean, this scene goes on in the movie for over 5 minutes or so. It's a really big scene. And again, I think just from an emotional impact, I can't think of anything I've seen this year that was so emotionally impactful.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have the right actors,
Yeah.
it just wouldn't have worked. And this is
Right.
why I say she should get nominated.
I think she should too. I think she was excellent in this film, and I think just speaking to her character, I noticed right off the bat when she resurfaced, when we saw her again at the funeral, her hair was the first thing I noticed.
Right.
Just wow, she looks different. She looks put together. She looks like she has her life together. But I don't think she changed that much. I think it was something where it was her exterior trying to hide what's happening on inside. She's trying to use her appearance to kind of hide what's going on really inside, because she did in this scene, she did say a line to Lee where she said something along the lines of, "My heart breaks every day," or "I think about it every day," or something like that, where you can tell that she maybe isn't that different than where she started, but she's trying to put on appearances of like, hey, everything's okay, I'm going to be okay. And then when she runs into him, it's the first time that we see her just break down since obviously the fire happened. So I thought she was fantastic in this film, and in every scene. I just the just kind of depths of her as an actress, being able to kind of hit this scene, and also the kind of funny scenes when she's yelling at Lee, and just all of these things. I think she did an excellent job.
And she has come a long way from Dawson's Creek,
Yes.
to say the least.
Yes.
But I couldn't agree with you more. And I guess ever since Dame Judi Dench won the Academy Award for Shakespeare in Love, which she's only in the movie for like 2 minutes, like the first time ever. She gets Best Supporting Actress, I believe. If I'm wrong, somebody please correct me. If I'm right, hey, good for me. But she's in this movie a lot more than 2 minutes.
Right.
But it is so impactful. And again, I also appreciated the way this movie was shot, because it plays with time, because we see things in flashback, but we see them in a chronological flashback.
Yeah.
Which I appreciated. And there were certain times where I was like going, why am I watching this? Like, why are we watching them playing pool and partying up at the house? And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Everything had a reason, in this movie.
Right.
So Michelle Williams was fantastic. The other person too, because I know that we talked about Michelle Casey, is the person that plays the nephew, who Lucas
Hedges. Yes.
He
excellent.
is amazing.
Yes.
And it took me a while. I had to look him up on IMDb, but he was in a really smart miniseries called The Slap. It was like, the hell have I seen this kid before?
Yeah.
Again, he too was so good, and he played it so well and he played it from depressing to cavalier to, him having his issues, and he too had a very fine balancing act, because there were times he had to be funny, and then of course there's the scene in the freezer, and that scene was, again, a very emotional scene, and and again, the way he worked with Casey Affleck was just superb.
Yeah,
just superb.
I thought he was excellent, and I saw an interview with him, and he was speaking about that scene, the freezer scene, and he said he asked, I don't remember if it was Kenny or who he was talking to, how as an actor do you prepare for that? Like, how do you just break down like that, And he said there is no way to prepare. the way to prepare is just to do it. You know, so just having that maturity at his age and having that talent as an actor to be in that scene and just be looking for something to eat and then just completely break down. He said, you just have to start with a whale and then the rest will come. I thought he was excellent in that scene and all of his comedic kind of sarcastic scenes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I loved the very first scene that we saw him in at the hockey practice, you know, where he's just like, oh, great, like, here's my uncle. You know, just, I thought the very first scene we saw him in kind of set up his character for me.
Agreed.
It was,
Agreed.
I loved him. I want to go, I want to see more of him.
Yeah. He was not your typical teen, very strong, great actor. That scene in the freezer, too, like, by the freezer, we understand, you know, like, why he's having this difficult time in the freezer. And again, Casey Affleck's like, look, I don't like it either. Nothing we can do. He's being fatherly, which I really appreciate about that.
Yeah.
He was just really solid. I see big things, you know, hopefully, again, I'm with you. I want to see him in more things. So he is a very talented young man. So look forward to watching him in some more things. So I want to talk about, you know, we talked a little bit about Kyle Chandler. Again, not in the movie a lot. You know, I found it fascinating. What I found most fascinating about his character, okay, is that most of the times when we were on the boat in the flashback scenes, okay, it was really focused with Casey and Lucas. Kyle was there, but he was in like what do you call it, the wheelhouse, like he was steering the boat. He was either in shadow. You rarely saw his face, except for a scene here or there. He was on the boat, but you couldn't see them, and I really appreciate that because that's what you're focusing on, the relationship of uncle and nephew. But the scene in which Casey's, you know, Lee moves into his apartment, and Kyle's like, dude, you need furniture. He's like, he goes, no, I'm fine. He goes, let's go out and get you some furniture. You know, again, you said it earlier, the bond that they had as brothers, Lee leaned on his brother, and he allowed his brother to help him. Losing that's like very impactful.
Definitely. Yeah, I thought that I wanted to bring up that scene as well when they move in together. When Lee says, you know, I don't need furniture, and was it Kyle says, you know, he looks at Lucas or Patrick and he says, okay, let's go. And I thought at that moment he was saying, okay, I'm going to let you stay, Lee. You don't have to have furniture. I'm taking my kid and I'm going home. But instead, he turns back to Lee and he says, let's go. And it seems like Lee only really listened to Kyle in this movie.
Yes.
You know, Randy a little bit in the beginning after she had to scold him twice. You know, she said, get these guys out. He didn't. She had to come back and say, get these guys out in some more profane language. And then he finally did, you know. But thinking throughout the movie, Kyle's really his brother's really the only person that he really listened to, you know. And so I think that says a lot, speaking about that bond. And I thought it was interesting, or actually, you know, it's Joe Chandler. He has the same last name as his character.
Right. He does have
so
he does.
Yes. But I thought it was interesting that the director, Kenny, first saw Kyle Chandler as the cop in Wolf of Wall Street. And he said his performance just jumped out at him because he played the part with such great humor as if he was amused with the quarry. So if anybody's seen Wolf of Wall Street, you know kind of the premise of that. But I thought that's interesting. I always like to see or hear when directors first see the actors that they want in the film and kind of what stands out to them. So just seeing that the comedic presence kind of sparked with Kenny, I think says something for kind of the film, how it does have those moments in there. So I thought he was a great choice. I had not really seen him in other works of his, but I really enjoyed
Friday
it.
Night Lights television?
I did not watch that, but I know he was the main
Did
main
you
character.
so and you never saw Super 8? Again, very interesting because he plays a father, a single parent, who lost a wife to tragedy.
Oh, wow.
And he's really solid. So I mean, Super 8 actually is a very underappreciated movie put up and directed by and written by J.J. Abrams. But Kyle Chandler is, he's a really good actor. He was also in Peter Jackson's King Kong, but he can play a bad guy as well. But he was really solid in this. And again, I'm gonna say his accent, flawless. I thought he did a really good job. So I want to move over to something that we always talk about here at Anatomy, because I'm a big music score person. The one thing about this movie that I think for me where there might have been a little bit of disconnect, believe it or not, was some of the music cues. There were times where he went to like classical music and it sort of kind of took me out. But believe it or not, a lot of this movie was scored by a mother-daughter act from Manchester. Composer Leslie Barber sent him a short piece for cappella voices she called the Plymouth Choral, and he played it against the scene of Lee. It was the first thing we ever tried against the scene, and we never tried anything else because it just fit so well. And Lonergan later learned it was especially apropos for the story of family ties because the voices all belong to the composer's 19-year-old daughter, Jacoba.
Wow.
So, which I found very... Now, the choir stuff I found worked.
Yeah.
I thought very well. It was just very interesting how they worked. A lot of this was set up on Skype, recording in her dorm room, and the effect was to make it sound like the music was coming from a small space, from inside Lee's emotional world. I also took great care to record all of Jacoba's breaths, so you really got the sense of the person as if this is from a deep place.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I had read that when I was looking at reviews of people. A couple of times I saw that people said that like you said, it kind of took them out a little bit. I was kind of on the opposite. I really love when that kind of music is in films. For some reason, it makes me feel it so much deeper. I don't know. I don't know what it is about it. So I was kind of shocked that was in there. I was not expecting that type of music for this film. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that. So when it happened, it was kind of, for me, a pleasant surprise. But I did see that kind of critique from a couple people saying that it was just kind of, it didn't feel like it fit.
In some scenes for me. But, Kenneth Lonergan says there are many ways for a film to incorporate music. But he favors one in particular, and that is counterpoint is usually the way that I like to use it. It always feels right to have the music help you step back a little and look at the whole environment, not just the character's experience. And, I have to say, in this case, that's exactly what this movie did, or what the music, what the music did in this movie. So it was a very interesting, I found that to be a very interesting, thing that Lonergan, how he approaches score.
Right.
It's because it can be so different for so many composers and who and how they pick, the composers. So, and I appreciated that too.
Yeah, and I kind of think it's, I know we'll also probably get into cinematography a little bit, but I think looking back at, the music, Kenny... I keep calling him Kenny like I know him.
Right,
but I'm talking about. My buddy Kenny.
My buddy Kenny.
Yeah.
Kenny Lonergan. Yeah. Hey, he could be buddies with us after he sees us because we got nothing but high praise. Kenny. Nothing to...
But he said that he wanted, the cinematography, and I think it spills into music too, to kind of be understated. He didn't want anything too crazy to take away from the characters and to take away from the story. Right. So maybe that's kind of why he did choose this kind of music, which is, some people, it did kind of disconnect him, but he didn't choose anything that was kind of over the top crazy because he wanted us to focus on what was actually happening in these people's lives. But
I have to forgive me for, I'm going to break the plane here. people, if you're hearing a tearing sound that's being picked up by our awesome mics, that's my Boston Terrier, a dog tearing up a towel.
He came for the movie.
He came,
he's
yeah, he was,
Boston
yeah,
too,
yeah.
so.
So he came for this. So that's what you were hearing. Nobody is getting ripped apart, except for a poor towel. So in any case, now. Well, the cinematography, I thought, in this movie, too, it really set... First off, I think it works with Lonergan's script, because one of the things that I had heard about Lonergan's script is the way he would describe a scene. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't just say Seatown. He would describe the way the ice sounded cracking on the boats. He would say Manchester by the sea. He would use the town. It's the locale, and a starry night. Mm-hmm. So from reading the script, you got a great sense of what things are going to look and or sound like. And I think this gives a cinematographer an amazing approach to filming this movie. Mm-hmm. And the way this movie looked, too, it wasn't overly drab or depressing. The scenes with the snow, I had to say, I was like, oh, yeah, got to go out and shovel every day, got to do the walkway, the driveway. But it was just a period of time, it's a season, and it could reflect what's going on. The topic, I think, was depressing enough, but it didn't have to be. There could be really gloom in January and February in New England, with the bad weather, but I think that from a cinematography standpoint, the movie looked fantastic.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was beautiful. Just even opening up in the town when they're fishing, and you could see the just gorgeous horizon of the water and the sun starting to come up. I thought it was beautifully done. And then just learning more, looking into quotes from the cinematographers, everybody that worked on that did say, that Kenny didn't want anything crazy. They didn't want to have these wide angle shots and all of this stuff going on. They wanted us to just focus on the characters and the storyline and what these people were going through. And then I did like just seeing the shots around town, the different homes. And, I don't know. I just thought that every shot was, I think, thought out and not in an overly done way. It was just very beautifully done.
And again, with budget limitation, too, you have to be a lot smarter.
Yeah.
Editor Jennifer Lame, she, had the task of cobbling together, piecing together flashbacks into our current stay, into, and making this resonate, and she, interesting, she goes, instead of using a visual device to cue the audience when the narrative was weaving from past to present, they moved in and out without notice. Interestingly enough, there was only, I guess at the beginning, I found it a little jarring. I was like, whoa, wait, what? Mm-hmm. And obviously, Casey Affleck's hair was a little bit blonder. It wasn't, I was like, oh, okay, I get what's going on. But it just took that one scene for me to get into the cadence of this movie, to get into those beats.
Yeah.
And I you appreciate that. Going into it and not having to really beat us over the head, because once you see it, you're into the rhythm of the movie. And the other thing that I really appreciated about it too is that it wasn't overly used.
Yeah.
You understand? Right?
Yeah, I agree.
It wasn't overly used. It was used for when it had to be used, key moments.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you'd go long stretches without having it happen.
Yeah.
And then there was a point in the movie where it never happened again.
Yeah.
And that was refreshing as well.
Right.
Keep going back and forth.
Yeah,
you get a little tired.
I agree. Sometimes I think in films, if it's not done right, it gets almost... I don't want to say annoying, but kind of, it's like a nuisance almost. You're like, okay, wait, where are we and what's happening? And I think, like you said earlier, I think was very a very good thing that they did, where they did the flashback scenes, but they did it in a chronological order.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like we were flashing back all over the place, or we're like, okay, wait, is this before the accident, after the accident? What's happening? They did it in a nice way to where we went back at certain times, but we knew we were for, ahead of what we had seen the last point.
Right.
So I thought that helped as an audience member kind of understand where we were at
Agreed.
in the scene. So,
and it wasn't as if the flashbacks could have been their own movie.
Right.
Alone, they really were nothing. I mean, they only, the flashbacks really did serve to build our characters for our audience to get a better understanding of why our characters are the way they are now. And they did tell their story, but they told it within the structure of Manchester by the Sea, because it didn't end in a flashback. It didn't, they were important for the way that it was told. I just thought this is a movie in which flashback was used to a plum. I thought it was fantastic. So, I wanted to talk too about sound as well. The sounds in this movie, again, it wasn't over the top, but you didn't have to be. You didn't have to hear the rolling of an ocean during a nor'easter storm. There was snow, but I thought that the sound captured Manchester by the Sea. Folks, if you're ever in the North Shore, if you were ever to go up to Gloucester, Essex, Manchester, that is what that town would sound like. You would walk through the town, you would hear the seagulls, you'd hear the rolling of the ocean. Things actually, when it snows, things become a little bit quiet. I thought the sound design in the movie was very fantastic too. I felt like a local, being a local. Yeah. I felt at home. I thought that they did an amazing job. And even we could talk about set design and Lee's Boston apartment. Again, he had a specific sense of what he wanted to hear and the characters to feel. Setting up that apartment, like what he says, oh yeah, it's a it's a one bedroom. He goes, it's just a room. He's like, come on, Lee, it's just a room. You need furniture in here. You really got a sense of where Lee is coming from, Yeah. I think another scene that was really great, when he was moving up to Manchester by the Sea, when he was moving into Manchester, his whole life fit in a box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a box. Just took everything.
Right.
A box.
Yeah. And I think that says a lot about his character. Like you were saying, how he said, oh, it's a one bedroom, and his brother's like, no, this is just a room. But I think to his character, that didn't matter. That didn't occur to him. If he did notice it, it wasn't something that meant anything to him, because he was just so broken that it wasn't anything that he seemed to care about.
Right.
Just like you said, he had everything in a box. He didn't need anything because he wasn't passionate about anything. He didn't want anything because he was so damaged. Yeah.
And I have to too also forgive me, another football. The movie that Lonergan had worked on before wasn't Madeline, it was Margaret. Margaret was this opus that really set him in a funk, and I found it very, very interesting. Found this article in Variety, and he was asked, how does it feel to finally have the ordeal of Margaret behind you? And he says, it feels good to be further away from it. I don't think it's ever going to be completely behind me. Which I find very interesting quote. The whole experience covered about 8 years if you had to include the whole making of the movie and then the problems with the movie and the saving of the movie. It was a big, big deal. It was a big deal to him.
Yeah.
So I don't even feel like it's entirely behind me. And I don't know if I really want it to be completely, because I still really liked the movie. So much has happened since then that has nothing to do with the movie, so it's hard to answer that. And I just go back to that opening quote that I said of Lonergan about making a movie where things aren't really neatly tied up. You don't get over tragedy. Yeah. This was he's not over like what happened to this movie, because he expected so much more. And you hear writers, directors talk about the project as their babies. And for him, for what he had to endure to get Margaret out or get it made, obviously still resonates with him. I sort of kind of see that writing this, although on a far more tragic level. but you see where he's coming from. Like, he can't get over it in a sense, and he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And I just found that very interesting, and it makes me wonder if there was no Margaret, if he never set to make that movie, could he have done Manchester by the Sea?
Probably not. I would put it out there and say probably not. And I think that's why, moments that happen in our lives, obviously, what happened to Lee was on another level.
Another plane. Altogether.
Can't even.
I'm not comparing.
Right.
No.
But any sort of hardship or any sort of tragedy, on that kind of level that Kenny experienced, I think that quote, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." I think it says something and adds to the character of yourself, that you're able to do things and create works like this and create masterpieces like this that you did not have the experience of before. So I think that absolutely had something to do with this film. And I don't know.
Yeah,
I think he would agree, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if he would. I would love
to.
I would love to further explore, because it just, hearing him talk about Margaret, like, just the way he talked about that movie, what it meant to him and its loss and what he had to go through. I just wonder, wow, could you have been in a place to write Manchester by the Sea? Because he obviously has these emotions still within him. When asked the question by Variety about, are you glad it's behind you? And he's like, well, it really isn't, to an extent. I find that very, very fascinating. So what else? Have we missed anything? Have we missed any detail? Have we, was there something that...
Well, we could talk just quickly about the reception that it got on Rotten Tomatoes. And that was one reason why I really wanted to see this movie, because it got a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Absolutely.
Which is huge number. Audience score was 92%, so obviously a lot of people like this film, like you and I. IMDb, it got 8.6. Critics' Choice Awards, already it's nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Young Actor, Best Acting Ensemble, Best Screenplay, and Best Director. So it's getting a lot of accolades, obviously, and I could see why it was...
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, I think we're going to go into award season, and haven't seen everything yet. I mean, the next movie... that is getting close to, or if not even more buzz, is this movie called La La Land,
I'm excited
which
to
seems
see
to be an antithesis to Manchester by the Sea. I think, I'm going to say it here without even having seen La La Land yet. I think it would make a great double feature.
It's gonna
see
be amazing.
Manchester by the Sea,
Yep.
and then go see La La Land to feel better about yourself. But yes, you're talking about reception. And thus far, all those accolades. The movie opened up November 18th. And as we're looking at, it's done close to $10 million thus far. It's doing pretty good. I mean, it's. I think that the way this movie is being released, I think is the. It's the smart way to do it. You can't put this movie out in 1,500, 2,000 locations. People just aren't going to go.
Yeah.
This is a movie that needs to ride a wave of these accolades, because these are the things that'll get people talking. The other thing, though, is it's an original story.
Yeah.
Which to me is refreshing within itself. And regardless of its... regardless of its subject matter, trust me, it's one that you can endure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one that you can endure, because I just believe that the family, Casey Affleck's character is trying to endure. They're trying to, he's trying to move on. Other people have moved on, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
And being comfortable with what you can, what boundaries you can and can't do. I think that's amazing. I really do feel, too, that the reception is going to carry this movie through the holidays. Through the holidays into January. And I think Roadside has their work cut out for them, because as things like the Golden Globes start coming out, you know, they're going to try to get this into more and more and more and more theaters.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and I think this movie, too, is definitely going to be one of those films that kind of gets spread by word of mouth.
Sure.
You know, because this is a film that obviously, at least for me, stays with you. You know, this is something that I thought about a couple days after seeing it, you know, and it's like just, it kind of resonates with you. The story, the characters, you think about them, you know, it's not something that you leave the film and you leave the theater and go, okay, well, that's great. And then you move on with your life. Like a couple days later, I was thinking about Lucas and where his character would be. So
I'm so happy that you said that too, because yeah, the movie seeped in with me as well. There was a lot to think about, you know, even, you know, it wasn't just the ride home, you know, after, you know, you said you had a half-hour ride.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just the drive home, you know, where I was thinking about this movie, and, you know, my knee-jerk reaction was not as depressing as I thought it was going to be. I did find elements of humor in it. And then I really started to think about case performance, and I started to think about storytelling. All for the good of the show, of course, folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? But it definitely is a movie that stays with you, but not in a bad way.
No.
Like, I don't go, whenever I think of Manchester by the Sea now, I don't think, oh, good God, that depressing movie.
know.
I think about it in a way of, wow, what amazing craftsmanship.
Yeah.
What a great performance. And, geez, I might be able to see it again at some point.
Yeah.
Just to maybe pick up on other things
Right.
that, you know, to get on second viewing.
Yeah.
That's the kind of movie Manchester by the Sea is in. I think that's part of the reason why it's been getting all the accolades that it's been
Absolutely.
getting.
There was a quote that I think summed it all up for me. One of the producers, Walsh, said, you know, that this movie is about things don't always end neatly. There are hard knocks that come. At any moment, anyone can be disrupted. Anything can happen. We are all just players in the greater scheme.
Yep.
And I think that sums it up so beautifully for me, and it has kind of helped me moving on past thinking about it. You know, I just think that kind of is exactly what this film is about.
Yeah, agreed. So, well, I really do think at this point we did reception, we've done sound, we've done production, location.
I think we hit everything.
So I think we've hit everything. So why don't we start to wrap things up? Again, final thoughts on Manchester by the Sea.
Loved it. I thought it was a great film, and just diving in deeper and looking at the backstory of it, how it got made, you know, the characters behind it, the actors behind it. I have such a, you know, more of an appreciation for it than when I first saw it. I think it was a great film that, like I said, is going to stay with me. It's not going to be just done after this. I'm going to keep thinking about it and thinking about the characters, and I think that's what really makes a good film, when it kind of stays with you and you it resonates with you. You learn something about yourself or about life. So I loved it. Big fan.
Yeah, and you know, I'll say, you know, not every movie has to be that way, but when they are that way and they're able to do it
It's
in a
special.
very thoughtful, artistic, very wonderful manner, it is special. I do believe that Manchester by the Sea is a special movie. What do you think about Manchester by the Sea? What do you think about our breakdown and analysis of it? Please feel free to comment on YouTube or ping us. Stay tuned to Anatomy of a Movie too, because we still have the rest of this holiday season and more movies to talk about. Emily, thank you again.
Thank you.
For
So much
being
fun.
here. It
Yes.
really is.
Yes.
You know, you're tremendous, and thank you very much
You
for
as
your
well.
insights.
Thank you.
You're very kind for saying so. Where can people support you on social media?
You can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at OMG It's MLE.
And you can support me on Twitter at DMovies1701. And again, please feel free. This is a discussion about movies, folks. This is why we're here. We want you to be a part of it. Let us know what you think of Manchester by the Sea or any other movie that we've dissected and talked about on Anatomy of the Movie. Until next time, we'll see you. We'll see you at the movies.
Yes. Bye.
Producer is Maria Menounos. Panos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.